There is a cave in Mexico where crystals grow as long as buses in air hot enough to kill a human being from the inside in 15 minutes. There is a river deep in the Amazon hot enough to cook anything that falls in. And for more than a century, scientists dismissed it as a legend. And at number 3, you will see a place cut off from the rest of the world for over 20 million years. Somewhere that, by the standards of biology, should not be sharing a planet with the rest of us. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will know 10 hidden places on Earth that even the people living closest to them cannot believe are real. Earth's surface has been mapped for centuries. Every continent measured, every coastline charted, every mountain named. And yet, in 2019, a genetic study published in the journal Nature Communications described hundreds of human skeletons at the bottom of a single Himalayan lake. Bodies from regions thousands of miles apart, people who, by every reasonable account, should never have crossed paths. And around 2015, an entire mountain in Peru, striped in 7 colors, emerged from beneath the ice that had hidden it for thousands of years. These are not places lost to history. They sit on the same earth you walk every day, and the people living closest to them either do not understand them, cannot explain them, or refuse to believe they are real. We begin in Patagonia with the gentlest secret on this list. Number 10. The Marble Caves. In the cold blue water of General Carrera Lake on the border between Chilean and Argentine Patagonia, there is a cave you cannot reach on foot. To enter it, a small boat has to thread between curved arches of marble. Walls polished smooth by more than 6,000 years of glacier-fed water rising and falling against solid stone. Inside, the rock is not gray. The walls look as if they were carved from frozen smoke, and the whole chamber glows with a shifting blue light refracted up from beneath the lake. The only sound is water lapping against stone the glacier has polished into waves, and the boat barely fits between the walls. Locals call it the Marble Cathedral. Geologists call it one of the largest, slowest natural carvings on the planet, the work of an entire glacier leaning on limestone for the length of recorded civilization. Almost no one outside Patagonia has ever seen it. And this is the easiest place on this list. Number 9. Las Pozas. 300 kilometers inland from the Gulf of Mexico in a cloud forest near the town of Xilitla, there is a city no one ever built to live in. Concrete towers stained green by rain and lichen rise 25 meters above the canopy. Staircases climb into open sky and simply stop. Pillars carved like enormous orchids stand in clearings the jungle is steadily swallowing. There are 36 structures across 80 acres of rainforest, and no one is quite sure how many are still standing. The place is called Las Pozas. Edward James, the English patron of Salvador Dali, built it over 35 years, finishing in 1984. He set out to make a surrealist garden. What he left behind, deep in the Huasteca highlands, looks more like the ruins of a civilization that never existed. Mist drifting between moss-covered pillars, the remains of something dreamed rather than built. Farmers a few kilometers away know it is there. Most of the outside world does not. And the jungle works faster than the concrete, so it is quietly disappearing, pillar by pillar, staircase by staircase. But compared to what was waiting high in the Himalayas, Las Pozas almost feels understandable. Number 8. Roopkund Lake. At 5,029 meters above sea level in the Indian Himalayas, there is a shallow glacial lake that stays frozen most of the year. When the ice thaws in summer, something rises to the surface that does not belong there. Bones, hundreds of them. Femurs, skulls, ribs bleached pale by altitude and ultraviolet light. The remains of between 600 and 800 people scattered across 30 meters of shoreline. Locals call it Skeleton Lake. There is no shelter anywhere near it. No trees, no village, only ice, bare rock, and thin, freezing air. For more than half a century, everyone assumed these were soldiers or pilgrims who froze in a single storm. Then in 2019, a genetic study published in the journal Nature Communications tested DNA from 38 of the skeletons. The results were not what anyone expected. The bones belonged to 3 separate groups of people. One was South Asian from roughly the 9th century. Another was Eastern Mediterranean. A third came from Southeast Asia. And they had died at this one remote lake across a span of more than 1,000 years. No archaeological evidence places any of these populations at 5,000 meters in the Himalayas. Think about what that means. But the next place is not a mystery of who died there. It is a mystery of what is still alive. Number 7. The Movile Cave. In 1986, near the Black Sea coast of Romania, a worker drilling test boreholes broke through a layer of clay he was not expecting. Below it, he found a cave. That clay had sealed it off from the outside world for roughly 5.5 million years. The air inside is not breathable. It holds about 1/3 of the oxygen of normal air, 3 times the carbon dioxide, and heavy concentrations of hydrogen sulfide, the gas that gives rotten eggs their smell. Where water collects, it is laced with sulfuric acid. Nothing should be alive down there. Sunlight has not touched the place since before our ancestors split from chimpanzees. And yet, when biologists from the Romanian Academy first lowered themselves into that darkness through the 1990s breathing bottled air, they cataloged 48 species of animals living inside it. 33 of them exist nowhere else on Earth. Blind, colorless leeches, pseudoscorpions with no eyes, insects that pull their energy not from sunlight, like every other food chain we know, but straight out of the chemicals in the water. A process called chemoautotrophy. A living world that begins not with light, but with poison. And that is the part that reaches past our own planet. If life can run on chemistry instead of sunlight, then the dark, ice-covered oceans of moons like Europa out at Jupiter are no longer obviously dead. The same trick keeping these creatures alive is exactly what scientists are now hunting for, hundreds of millions of kilometers away. An alien biosphere found by accident 10 meters under a quiet field. Today, only a handful of researchers are ever allowed inside. The rest of us will almost certainly never see it. Number 6. The Plain of Jars. On a plateau in the Jianghuang province of northern Laos, scattered across more than 90 separate sites, there are jars. Around 2,100 of them. Carved from sandstone, granite, and limestone. Single blocks of solid rock. Some weigh more than 10 tons. The tallest stand 3 meters high, taller than a grown adult, and no one knows what they are for. They were already ancient when they were first written about, dated to the Iron Age, older than any written record in the region. Local tradition says a race of giants brewed wine in them. Archaeologists believe they were burial vessels from a funerary tradition the world has completely forgotten. A civilization that laid its dead inside multi-ton stone jars for 1,000 years, then vanished before anyone outside its borders wrote down what it meant. But almost no human remains have ever been found inside the jars. The site joined the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2019. And there is one more reason most of it stays empty of visitors. During the Vietnam War, the United States dropped more bombs on Laos than fell on all of Europe in the Second World War. And much of that ordnance is still buried in the same ground as the jars. To walk between them in many places is to walk through a minefield. But what was waiting in the Peruvian Amazon was not built by anyone, and it was not dead. If you are still watching, you already understand something most people never stop to think about. The map is not finished. You are about to reach the place at number 3, the one I promised you at the start. The island that has been alone for 20 million years. But first, the legend that scientists laughed at for over a century. A river deep in the Amazon, hundreds of kilometers from any volcano, hot enough to kill in seconds. Number 5. the boiling river. Deep in the Peruvian Amazon, near the village of Mayantuyacu, there is a river about 6 kilometers long. Along its hottest stretches, the water averages around 86 degrees Celsius, 186 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to cook a fish in under a minute. Animals that fall in do not climb out. For centuries, the indigenous Ashaninka people spoke of it and treated it as sacred. Western scientists dismissed the story, for the same reason they dismiss most stories like it. There is no volcano anywhere near it. The nearest active volcano is more than 700 kilometers away, and in the geological models, a river this hot simply does not exist in a non-volcanic stretch of the Amazon. Then in 2011, a young geophysicist named Andres Russo, who had grown up hearing the legend from his grandfather, went to look anyway. He found it. He measured it. The water was real, and so were the temperatures. A boiling river hundreds of kilometers from the nearest volcano. By every model on the books, it should not exist. His later work, backed by National Geographic, points to a vast, slow-moving geothermal fault system carrying heat toward the surface, though the exact source is still not fully understood. And yet the river was not even the most impossible thing Peru had been hiding. Number 4. Vinicunca. In the Peruvian Andes, about 100 kilometers southeast of Cusco, there is a mountain ridge striped in 7 colors: red, pink, lavender, mustard yellow, mint green, turquoise, white. The colors come from layered mineral deposits, iron oxides, copper sulfides, clays, buried under ice for most of recorded history. The mountain is called Vinicunca. Outside the village at its foot, almost no one had ever laid eyes on it. What changed was the climate. Beginning in the early 2000s, the glacier that had covered it started to retreat. By around 2015, the colored ridges were fully exposed, bands of crimson and gold and green emerging meter by meter from under the melting ice for the first time in thousands of years. Drone footage reached the rest of the world within months. The Quechua communities at its base had always known a mountain was there. They had walked past it for generations. But the colors were new even to them. The land they had grown up on had been wearing a different face their entire lives. And here is what makes this unsettling. If a mountain 5,200 meters high, painted in 7 colors, can stay hidden from satellites until the ice melts off it, then the honest answer to the question, what else is under there, is one no scientist on Earth can give you yet. Number 3, the one I promised you, Socotra. About 250 kilometers off the coast of Yemen, alone in the Arabian Sea, there is an island that has been cut off from every other landmass for an estimated 20 million years. Roughly 1/3 of the plant species growing on it exists nowhere else on Earth. The most famous of them is the dragonblood tree, a single thick trunk that splits into a dense upturned umbrella of branches, like a mushroom carved out of wood. Cut into its bark, and the sap that runs out is deep red. Medieval traders who used that sap as a dye and a medicine believed it was the actual blood of dragons. The trees grow only here. They cannot survive anywhere else. Around them stand bottle trees, swollen fat at the base to hoard water through the dry season, and giant cucumber trees that look less like real plants than like illustrations from a children's book. In all, around 700 species on Socotra are found nowhere else in the world. Birds, lizards, snails, insects, descended from ancestors that arrived 20 million years ago, drifted into isolation, and slowly became something the rest of the planet has no copy of. The island belongs to Yemen, which has been at war since 2015. International tourism is, in practice, closed. UNESCO named Socotra a World Heritage Site in 2008 and has warned since that the fighting puts the whole endemic ecosystem at risk. So here is where it stands. 1/3 of an isolated 20-million-year-old living world is now hidden behind a war zone. Most people alive will never set foot on it. Most will never even see a photograph. And here is what makes this disturbing. The dragon blood tree only reproduces under very specific cloud and mist conditions. And those conditions are slowly disappearing. Researchers estimate that within the next century, these trees may survive only in old photographs. But the next place was never hidden at all. It sat in plain sight for 200 years and no one could explain it. Number 2. Lake Hillier. 600 meters long, 250 across, on a small uninhabited island off the southern coast of Western Australia, there is a lake the color of bubblegum. A flat, solid, vivid pink. From the air, the contrast looks almost faked. Bright pink water ringed by dark green forest, sitting right against the deep blue of the Southern Ocean. 3 colors that have no business sharing a single frame. And it is not a trick of the light. Not pink at certain angles, not pink only in certain seasons. Permanently pink. Still pink in a glass jar after you scoop the water out and carry it away. Lake Hillier was first recorded in 1802 by the British navigator Matthew Flinders. And for more than 2 centuries, the simplest possible question, what makes the water that color, had no confirmed answer. It was only a 2022 environmental DNA study that finally pinned it down. A dense community of salt-loving microbes, including an alga called Dunaliella salina, that floods itself with red pigment to survive the crushing salt and ultraviolet glare. Billions of microscopic cells all bleeding the same color at once, but sit with the part before 2022. For 220 years, an obvious photographable feature of the Earth, on an island you can see from the Australian mainland, had no scientific explanation at all. Most lakes you have ever heard of were understood by the 1800s. This one held out into the smartphone age, and almost nobody noticed. But the final place was not just overlooked, it was sealed away, 300 meters underground, in air hot enough to kill. Number 1. The Cave of the Crystals. 300 meters below the Chihuahuan Desert in northern Mexico, there is a chamber about the size of a tennis court, and it is filled with crystals. Not small crystals, not the kind in a jewelry case. Selenite crystals the length of a city bus. The largest run more than 12 meters from end to end, weigh around 55 tons each, and are thought to be roughly 500,000 years old. They were found completely by accident in the year 2000 when miners working an industrial silver and lead mine drilled through a wall they did not know was there. It is called the Cueva de los Cristales, the Cave of the Crystals. And the reason almost no one had ever stood inside it is that it is one of the most lethal places a human being has ever deliberately entered. The air sits at around 58 degrees Celsius, 136 degrees Fahrenheit, at over 90% humidity. Together, that is like standing inside a sealed oven full of steam. The body cannot shed its own heat. Core temperature climbs within minutes. Without a refrigerated suit and a mask feeding cooled air, an adult collapses from heat stroke in under 15 minutes. A 2007 paper in the journal Geology explained how the crystals grew so large. The chamber had stayed flooded for around 500,000 years with mineral-rich water held almost perfectly steady at that same 58 degrees. The exact temperature at which selenite grows atom by atom, impossibly slowly. 500,000 years of perfect motionless stillness. Then human beings drilled in. Researchers were allowed short windows inside, under heavy medical supervision between 2006 and 2017. Footage exists. Photographs exist. But what most people never hear is what happened next. In 2017, the mining company switched off the industrial pumps that had kept the cave dry since the year 2000. Within months, the chamber filled back up with groundwater. The crystals are submerged again now in the same hot mineral water that grew them. The cave is, for all practical purposes, sealed. The largest crystals ever found. 500,000 years in the dark. Discovered, photographed, walked through for a handful of hours, and then closed again maybe for the rest of human history. And almost nobody noticed. If something that size with crystals that big can sit under a desert for 500,000 years without anyone knowing, the obvious next question is what is sitting under the ocean. That is the next video. Top 10 deepest places in the ocean. Even scientists are afraid to explore, and some of what is down there has still never been seen by human eyes. Subscribe so you do not miss it, and drop a comment and tell me which country you are watching from, and which of these 10 places you would most want to see with your own eyes. I read all of them, I promise.